it's a luminary of some sort, so I can't go beyond that.
The body is no longer discerning. It has now been torn from the head.
Now, if you believe in evolution, you got a problem. You think man's been here for 3 million years. There'd be about 150,000 people per square inch.
Because everyone knows they have an agenda now, so the spells don't work.
Major politicians, members of the university faculty and staff, legislators, and police are involved in a major cover-up of child slavery, drug trafficking, and murder.
A 47-story skyscraper, Building 7 folded neatly in 6.5 seconds.
The way to grow out of it is big families, praying, being like, great, now that we don't believe a bunch of stupid spells, let's crush.
I'm a theoretical physicist. I'm not a philosopher. However, I am rather dazzled by the fact that many of the basic mysteries that we find in string theory and the theory of everything seem to be mirrored in the Zohar and in the Kabbalah.
Modern astrophysics sounds like a Kabbalistic text.
When I first made the correlations between Kabbalah and science, I was stunned.
Well, the Kabbalistic description of creation is coming from a single little point, from a speck, and of having matter form and time and space form all together at the very beginning. This sounds very much to me like the description of the Big Bang.
I couldn't believe that the Kabbalists could derive these truths without really knowing any mathematics or physics.
The Zohar says those things. It could have been a lucky guess. I don't know.
They knew things about the universe that took us till now to discover.
It's rather amazing, this uncanny reflection of some of the most advanced cosmology coming from our satellites, coming from our atom smashers, coming from our blackboards, that are mirrored in the Zohar and ancient Kabbalistic texts.
Scientists specializing in quantum physics have discovered on their own the depth of matter described by Kabbalists more than 3,000 years ago.
Its task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity. It isn't such a crisis.
We know the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm?
You fired me once again! Not with these flames, which hither ye have brought from regions where I reign.
It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
I want to tell you about a few of the things that I have learned during these last 5 years of intensive research. Perhaps the most startling thing that I can share with you is that all of the conspiracy theories that you've ever heard about one world government, about the UN takeover of the world, all of those conspiracies have now been laid to rest. There's nothing conspiratorial about it. It's all published. The UN-funded Commission on Global Governance began meeting in 1992 in earnest and met for 4 years, and last fall released their final report.
The idea of what the ultimate goal for the New World Order is something that bothered me a lot in my early and really a lot of my research for what the New World Order was, as I was learning things like, the stuff in the food and the water and all the stuff that you learn, the genocide and the planned population reduction and the mind control and all the stuff that was going on. What did it all mean? What was it leading up to? The control grid, the cameras and the one world government and the one world economy and all this stuff. What did it mean? Because the thing that got me is what happens if they get it? What happens if they finally control everybody? It's a total lockdown, New World Order, 1984, Brave New World, whatever. It actually is that system. What then? Is it all going to just end and everybody sits back and they drink lemonade and say, hey, we did it, guys. But then the connection to Satanism is really what started to pique my interest early on, and that they were theistic, Satanists. They really did believe that Satan was God, and they actively worshipped him and received instructions from the spirit world. That was what tripped me out, and to see that network and every door that was kicked down, investigation led to somewhere some Satanistic connection. So the answer to what the ultimate goal and the question of who or what do I believe is behind it is the same. That is the Antichrist. The system is being built around us, the control grid, the economy, everything is being built to force everyone to worship the Antichrist. That is what this is all about. That's what makes everything make sense. It's the one component that makes everything make sense. And so what is behind it is a spiritual agenda, as it says in Ephesians 6:12. But it's also something that experientially that you can see in the research of the New World Order, that they are attending rituals, they are receiving instruction from those rituals, and that instruction is to do the nuts and bolts things, to create the system, to do this, to do the poisoning or whatever, all the different conspiracies that are a part of that have some sort of mechanism or use in this future world government, world religion, world economy, which has one purpose, is to extract the worship of humanity for an ancient cherub.
Here's the way they look at it. Here's their metaphor. Adam and Eve were held prisoner in the Garden of Eden by an unjust, cruel, and vindictive God until Lucifer, through his agent Satan, set man free from this garden by giving him the gift of intellect. Through the use of intellect, man will conquer the earth, will conquer nature, and will himself become God. It's taught in every Masonic temple in this land. Every secret brotherhood, every secret society, every mystical temple, every occult organization teaches the Luciferian philosophy.
When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled.
Lucifer, what is your problem?
Just that, sir.
Okay.
I'm a Christian, sir.
I'm pure and virtuous and wholesome and innocent. How can you say anything bad about me?
Sir, you need to be born again.
I am born again.
Now, did you just say that you were Lucifer?
I am Lucifer.
Okay, define Lucifer for me.
Pure, virtuous, wholesome, innocent individual that's out to help people.
Lucifer is?
Yeah.
Say that again. Lucifer is a pure, holy...
Virtuous.
Virtuous. Now, is he the Lucifer that God created?
That's the same one.
Oh, man, this is great. I'm going to put this on the internet.
Oh,
Amen.
God bless you,
Amen.
brother.
Because that's exactly what the Shriners and Masons teach, is that Lucifer is light. Sir, Jesus said, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not do these good deeds in your name? And you'll say, away from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you.
Jesus said it?
In Matthew chapter 5.
Mercy.
No.
That's hard to believe.
So you're a Christian and you don't know that? Actually,
no, I really am.
You are.
Because I'm pure and virtuous.
You're pure and virtuous, okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In other words, you're perfect without Jesus, right?
No.
Okay, tell me about Jesus. Who is Jesus?
Well, he's my leader.
Is he the Son of God?
Yes, he is.
Is he the only worshipful master?
Yes.
Have you ever been called worshipful master?
No, because I've just been too busy. I've been working.
Get out of it. See, this is what a Mason confesses, is that Lucifer is light.
The videotape provides a grainy glimpse into what appear to be the initiation rituals of a secret society that's been around since 1832, whose members have gone on to be leaders of Wall Street and the White House, the Senate and the Supreme Court. New York Observer investigative reporter Ron Rosenbaum accompanied a team of Yale students who shot these pictures 9 days ago. Initiates, known as neophytes, being forced to kiss a skull. Then members performing a mock killing.
And it's very difficult for many people to absorb this. It portrays fallen angels. These are not the good guys. Remember when Satan fell, a third of the angels fell with him. Not all of them, but a group of them, apparently, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, chose to try to create a hybrid race. Angels can't multiply. Angels are eternal. Reproduction is a process for mortals. But at the same time, Satan's got a problem. A third of the angels fell with him, so he's got a deficiency of 2-to-1 in any war that comes in, right? Now, the offspring of Nephilim, they're also called the Hagibarim, the mighty ones. And now, where the confusion starts to set in is when this Hebrew passage was translated into the Greek in the Septuagint, the word they used for the Nephilim was gigantes. It sounds like giants, and it turns out they were giants, but that's not what the word means. Gigantes comes from gigas, which means earthborn. So in the Hebrew, they're called the fallen ones. In the Greek, they're called the earthborn. The purpose of the flood was not just that there was sin in the land. There was, and that's emphasized. But if sin brings the flood, we better get some life jackets. No, there's something far deeper going on. That's what I want to sensitize you for when you do your own study and come to your own conclusions. But I want you to recognize there's something much more profound that God, it's a problem that God was solving, and that is that Satan's strategy was to contaminate the human race.
According to the book of Enoch, this is the origin of the mystery schools. The fallen angels taught mankind weapon making and warfare, applying makeup and jewelry, introduced mankind to psychedelic drugs, vampirism, enchantments, and cursings, as well as astrology. It is quite remarkable to see how much of what these watchers taught not only relate to the ancient mystery religions, but are common everyday things of the world we live in today. We even see the watchers teach mankind the art of abortion. Quote, "The fifth was Casdea. This is he who showed the Yaladim A'am all the evil strikings of unclean Rakim and demonic entities. He showed them the dashing of the embryo in the womb so that it would die." End quote.
Nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo. Signore Gesù Cristo, io ti permetendo Padre, Dio universo, che hai dato sempre il vostro umano, ti prego il tuo nome sempre benito, che sei il santo, che sei il nome. Cosa mi devo Spirito Maria? È di Cristo, è di Cristo, è di Cristo, non esiste.
Esiste, demonio!
Come fai a dimostrarlo? Come fai a dimostrare che esiste?
Tutto!
Ma questo...
Io esisto! E chi non ci crede bene?
Ma questo...
Oh no! Bitch!
Mike Alpha, we need ambulance, senior officers to the scene, we've got 2 possible fatals. Okay, my love.
I'm trying to make sure you're okay.
Right. Where's Paul? Oh, shit. Where's Paul?
Right. Where's Paul? Stay.
Oh.
As I got her towards the car, she unleashed a punch.
Oscar Tango 3.
And then she was off.
Fucking hell!
No!
And into the other side.
Jesus Christ!
Moving traffic again.
Her strength was phenomenal. Watch it, guys, watch it! Down! Legs down! Legs down!
They will close the net around us while we are playing soccer mom and soccer dad, while we are arguing over so many little things and mesmerized by so many trinkets. The net even now is closing around you and your children and your grandchildren, and it does not cause you to fear. You will be isolated from society, as has already happened. Anyone who tries to run for office who actually believes the Bible will be considered a lunatic until finally we are silenced. We will be called things that we're not and persecuted not for being followers of Christ, but for being radical fundamentalists who do not know the true way of Christ, which of course is love and tolerance. You'll go down as the greatest bigots and haters of mankind in history. They've already come after your children, and for most of you, they got them. They got them through the public schools and indoctrination and the university and indoctrination, and then you wonder why your children come out not serving the Lord. It's because you fed them right into the devil's mouth. So little by little the net is closing around, and then it's not little by little. Look how fast things are going downhill just in a matter of weeks. But at the same time, know this: persecution is always meant for evil, but God always means it for good. And is it not better to suffer in this life, to have an extra weight of glory in heaven? You must settle this in your mind. This is the one thing I want to say over and over. Down through history, you have a wrong idea of martyrdom and persecution. You think that these men were persecuted and martyred for their sincere faith in Jesus Christ. That was the real reason, but no one heard that publicly. They were martyred and they were persecuted as enemies of the state, as bigots, as narrow-minded, stupid people who had fallen for a ruse and can contribute nothing to society. Your suffering will not be noble. So your mind must be filled with the Word of God when all people persecute you and turn on you.
It's interesting, though, we now know for sure from declassified Central Intelligence Agency documents that Jerry Garcia was working for the CIA.
Absolutely.
Spreading all this LSD and drugs to everybody, encouraging the kids to think about necromancy and communication with the dead, promoting the drug revolution. He was a CIA operative.
Yes.
Isn't that an amazing thing? You know, so some people who worship Jerry Garcia, seems to be their anti-establishment. But he was par excellence establishment.
People hate to hear that.
What a deceit.
And cultures all around the world, actually, talk about gaining knowledge from elsewhere. You know, ancient aliens, they're always talking about ancient aliens. Well, it's true. I mean, that part of it is anyway, that, you know, the people around the world claimed that they had received knowledge and understanding of how to build megalithic structures and things of that nature from elsewhere. Now, I don't believe that we're talking about astronauts, ancient astronaut theory. I don't buy that. We're not talking about people from the Pleiades or Arcturus or Orion or whatever. I believe we're talking about the archons. What are the archons? Well, you know, first of all, it's just a Greek word. You know, it's nothing mystical about it. The word archon just simply means chief, commander with authority, you know, ruler. You know, it's talking about a person in position of leadership. In the book of Enoch, we see that 200 Watcher-class angels landed on Mount Hermon in the days of Jared. And among those 200, we are given a series of names, about 21 names. These would be the archons of the 200. These would be the leaders of the 200. And, you know, the book of Enoch tells you, you know, point blank that these angels taught men a whole lot of things, you know, like Azazel or Azazel taught men the art of digging up the metals of the earth and, you know, creating weapons of warfare, among other things. You know, so we've got a detailed description right there in the Hebrew, you know, extra biblical text of Enoch, but other cultures describe very similar things, that beings from elsewhere came down and taught them stuff. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3, the serpent's there in the garden, right, with Eve, and, you know, he's tempting her, you know, with the fruit, and he says, "You're not going to die. You will not surely die. For God doth know that in the day that you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil," right? So, what do we see there? We see 3 promises of the serpent. He says, immortality, right? You're not going to die. Your eyes will be open. You'll have greater wisdom and understanding and knowledge, right? And you shall be as the gods. You know what's funny about those 3? Adam and Eve already had them. Adam and Eve already had those 3. They were already immortal. Death didn't come until after they took a bite. Their eyes open, having greater wisdom and understanding. I mean, come on. They walked in the garden with God, the creator of the universe. It's kind of like, you know, hey, God, how did the Milky Way get there? Well, let me tell you, Adam. I mean, how much more wisdom and understanding do you need than walking in the garden with God every day, the creator of the universe, right? And you shall be as gods. They already were. They were made in the image and likeness of God. So the 3 promises of the serpent, they already had. And they took a bite and they lost all 3. And man has been trying to get it back ever since, apart from God. I think the real agenda of transhumanism is to get back the 3 things that humans lost in the garden and to be like God. Achieve immortality apart from God, have supernatural ability, become the gods of the ancient world. You know, that's the agenda. That's what they're working on, and it's happening. It's happening very quickly. And we need to be aware of it.
スーパーコンピューターができて、でその中へ人間が入り込むと、こう希望的観測としてね、あるいは それが嫌な場合は先ほどの人間の肉体があってで体はこう死ぬいろいろ故障するじゃないですか、はい、だからもう全部機械にしまうと、で脳だけ残すと、でネットとつながるとでスーパーコンピューターにつながってるから頭賢さはですね知能は人類の1兆倍、ぐらいあるわけですね、でそういう、神のようなね人間に
すごい話だな
りたい私はね。
これだからなんかねこう死ぬ時は死ぬでいいかっていうのはどっかあるんですよ。
それはね仕方がないからですよ。
そうです。
これが、ね、死ななくても済むというオプションがあった時にどっち選びます？
でもねそこ迷うとこでね自分の体が運命として受け止めて死んでいった方がいいんじゃないかなっていうところありますね。
それはねいやもう今まであらゆる生物が死ななきゃならないという運命を背負ってるからね、はい、それはもう宿命なわけです、はい、だけどカーツワイルはですよ、未来永劫に生きる方法がある、それは分かりませんよ、でもできたとしましょう、はい、ね、どっち選びますかって。そう言ったら辛いでしょう。
そこまでずっと生きたいですかね。
というかその中でね、肉体はなくなるわけだけど、はい、でも人間って肉体じゃないですよ。やっぱり精神魂意識でしょ、でこれだけが生き続ければ一種の天国ですよ。そこはね地獄かもしれんけどね。
地獄の可能性の方が高くないですか。
In Genesis 3:7 it states, Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. This act of sewing fig leaves to cover themselves is the first instance we see in the Bible of innovation in an attempt to solve a problem, in this case, the fall of humanity. Ever since the fall, mankind has been working diligently to reverse the effects.
This is a very widespread belief in our society. It's the kind of belief system of people who say, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. It's a belief system which has now been spread to the entire world. But there's a conflict in the heart of science between science as a method of inquiry based on reason, evidence, hypothesis, and collective investigation, and science as a belief system or a worldview. And unfortunately, the worldview aspect of science has come to inhibit and constrict the free inquiry, which is the very lifeblood of the scientific endeavor. Since the late 19th century, science has been conducted under the aspect of a belief system or worldview, which is essentially that of materialism, philosophical materialism. And these sciences are now wholly owned subsidiaries of the materialist worldview. I think that as we break out of it, the sciences will be regenerated.
But the dominant, metaphysical worldview that's taught in our universities and, in science is reductive materialism or naturalism. And this is the idea that all of reality is explained simply by matter and energy and acting according to the laws of chemistry and physics. However, they don't really have any evidence to make such a broad claim like that. And, I think that naturalism or reductive materialism itself is actually a mythology, mainly perpetrated by secularists and atheists to support their worldview. Now, they have what they call a program of demythologizing religious claims and supernatural claims. They believe that there are no true supernatural spiritual realities, only natural phenomena, and so they assume there must be a natural explanation behind every religious belief or supernatural claim. But the art of demythologizing is really itself a mythology because it just asserts a bald-faced assertion that there are no supernatural or transcendent kind of mysteries to life, and then it interprets everything that it cannot understand in terms of naturalism or reductive materialism. For instance, there's quite a few things that they don't have answers for, like the Big Bang cosmology. They've pretty much proven by their own scientific methods that the whole universe came into being at a point in time from nothing. Because nature came into being at that time, whatever caused that, whatever made that process ensue, is by definition supernatural. because it caused nature to come into being. So we really do have evidence for the supernatural in the Big Bang cosmology, just because whatever made it bang is by definition above natural. So they really have undermined themselves by their process of investigation. And there's other things like the origin of life. They really don't have any good natural explanations for how life got started. So, we see prominent scientists, looking at extraterrestrial explanations for that. Naturalism, reductive materialism, which is our dominant university-taught worldview, is in deep trouble. It's actually dying. I'm predicting that we're going to see quite a rise in the supernatural worldview. It's going to be something that's a little more in the occult, paranormal realm. But I think that materialism is actually dying, and it probably doesn't have another generation left before it's completely disproven.
Vatican owns some of the most powerful telescopes in the world. The Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope sits on top of the Mount Graham International Observatory in southeast Arizona. Next to this telescope on Mount Graham is another telescope, the Large Binocular Telescope named Lucifer, which stands for Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research.
Geoengineering is weather modification on a global scale. Many refer to this as chemtrails. This aircraft you see spraying right now is a KC-10, and the nozzles are visible. You see inside the circles, and you can see them shutting on and off in a moment as you watch this tape roll. And the dispute as to whether or not these programs are going on is really a moot point. We have more than enough data. We have actual footage, as you're seeing now, to show that these tankers are indeed spraying at altitude. The materials we see showing up in the ground are the exact materials named in numerous geoengineering patents, as many as 150 patents. So at this point, the notion that these programs are not going on is simply denial. Skies like this, many have grown to think are natural, but they're anything but. And we've seen this for so long now, and it's been ramped up at such a steady pace that people have simply become used to skies like this. Anybody who thinks grid patterns like this are natural should recheck their reality. This is anything but natural. We seldom see blue skies anymore. Skies like this have all too often become the norm. Unfortunately, most people don't even look up. I think at times you could start the sky on fire, nobody would notice.
It might come to a surprise to most people that one of the most dangerous worldviews one can hold is scientism. The failing of science is not really about the scientific method. It is about a largely unrecognized epistemology that developed as a result of the successes of science. This faulty epistemology can be called scientism, and we should make a sharp distinction between science and scientism. Science is a method of inquiry and the knowledge acquired by that method. The scientific method involves hypothesizing, experimenting, observing, and drawing conclusions. Central to the method of science is that no theory is ever considered final. All theories are subject to scrutiny and re-examination, and it is assumed that all will eventually be proven false by a more comprehensive theory. Scientism, on the other hand, is the belief that the methods of science are superior to any and all other methods of determining truth. Science believes things because they have been observed to be true. Scientism believes things because science says they are true. Most of us are guilty of scientism to some extent. We hear about things having been scientifically proven and we assume that means they must be true. We didn't do the experiments. We didn't look up the results. We didn't analyze the data. We simply assumed that if the science proved it, it must be true. This epistemological theory is often called Occam's razor, and it states that whenever there is two theories that explain the same observation, the one that requires the least number of assumptions is true. In other words, when looking for truth, we should always look for the simplest explanation possible. And when it comes to biblical interpretation, if the plain sense makes sense, seek no other sense. As humanity emerged from the Middle Ages, a battle began to rage between the fathers of the church and the new intellectuals of the Enlightenment. That struggle continues today, even though it had seemed for a time that the debate was over and that the science was settled. The issue is that science is no longer science. True science is simply the scientific method or empirical data. What is commonly called science these days is actually just the religion of the world, full of fabrication and an anti-God agenda. The problem for the church today is that many Christians, fearing man rather than God, have bought into much of the counter-biblical doctrines of scientism. We do stand with the Bible on some issues, but only if we feel the safety of numbers. Some Christians only seem to need the support of other Christians, while others require the approval of the world.
Once in a while I get people that really, that claim they don't believe in evolution. And my response generally is, why not? Really, why not?
You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a big bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago the earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. Found somebody to marry, and something to eat, of course, and slowly evolved into everything we see today. There are some lies in our science books. Taught it for 15 years. Even though I'm not teaching it anymore, I still like to study. It's so many neat things to learn. We're going to cover some of that tonight. I'm not against science, I'm not against schools, I'm not against teachers, because most of them don't know what they believe. You have to tell them. They teach the kids it all started with a Big Bang 20 billion years ago.
Before the Big Bang, there was nothing, literally nothing, an infinitesimal nugget of space. And then something happened, triggering the most colossal explosion in history.
Shame on you. What a shame.
Yes, boys and girls, you see, nothing exploded, and here we are. So I asked this professor if I could ask him some questions about the Big Bang. I said, where did all this matter come from? He said, well, we don't know that for sure. I said, well, sir, would you please tell me where the laws came from? The universe is run by laws, gravity, centrifugal force, inertia. Who gave the laws? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could you tell me where the energy came from? You know, it takes energy to make a Big Bang. Who bought the gas to run this machine anyway? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could I ask you another question? He said, sure. What else would you like to know? Else? What do you mean else? You haven't told me nothing yet. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. He said, Mr. Hovind, there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world. He said, do you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off of Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock.
Charles Darwin was disciplined. I mean, he did these extraordinary experiments, this series of experiments.
Then they're going to tell the kids, well, we have evidence for this theory. Charlie Darwin stopped off at these islands right there called the Galapagos Islands. Charlie studied the birds very carefully and said, you know what? I think all these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird. You see 14 kinds of birds, and you conclude that birds and bananas are related.
Here are these ancient dinosaur bones or fossils.
They tell the kids they have evidence of evolution from fossils. I don't think so. If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You don't know that it had any kids. And you sure don't know that it had different kids. You bring in a bone to the judge. Judge, I found this bone in the dirt. This is the ancestor of all the humans today. They would laugh at you. You don't know that that's the ancestor of anybody. And why on earth would you think a bone in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do? They'll say, boys and girls, you have 2 bones in your wrist, radius and ulna. And boys and girls, look at the whale's flipper carefully. Did you know the whale has 2 bones in his flipper? And they're called the radius and the ulna? Same as ours. Wow. Who named them, teacher? The whale? Think about it.
I'm here to tell my people it's time to stop believing bull just because of tell you bull with a straight look on their face.
And when the kid gets done with this course, he's going to think he knows how to think. But he doesn't. He knows how to be told what to think. Brainwashing at taxpayer expense. They want to use my tax dollars to teach that to your kids in our schools.
If you want to deny evolution, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them.
And that's where the problem comes in. Okay? If you want to believe in the Big Bang, just enjoy yourself, but keep your religion at home. The Russian atheist astronomer came to America and spoke at one of the universities, and he said, started off his speech, he said, folks, either there is a God or there isn't. Both possibilities are frightening. If there is no God, we're in trouble. But if God made the world, He owns it. That means He makes the rules. You see, if there is a God, we better find out who He is, and find out what He wants, and do what He says. Malcolm Muggeridge said, "I am convinced the theory of evolution, especially the extent to which it's been applied, will be one of the great jokes in the history books of the future."
We too old, we too smart to believe. Don't make sense. You too old to be believing in evolution.
It's a joke. And it would be a joke if it weren't for the tragic results. How many kids are taught this thing every day and believe it, and it destroys their faith?
46% of Americans believe in the creationist view. God created humans in the present form at one time in the last 10,000 years. Does that just shock you that so many people still think that?
Yes, it does.
Shock you?
It doesn't shock me, but it's pretty troubling.
How about the recent push to implement intelligent design in school curriculums?
It's very bad. It's very dangerous.
You don't mess with the truth. You just don't mess with.
Well, do we know the truth?
Well, we certainly know that the universe was created a long time ago.
Intelligent design is, as the saying goes, dumb.
Essentially, you can get a universe from nothing without any supernatural shenanigans. That basically, by quantum mechanics and the laws of physics we understand in principle, an entire universe with 100 billion galaxies, each containing 100 billion stars, can come from nothing because its total energy could be zero. And therefore, you don't need to literally violate any laws of physics to create a universe. And no, we don't know that for certain, but even that possibility is amazing. And I find it worth celebrating the fact that we can probe such things, and we shouldn't be afraid of a universe that maybe has no purpose, because we create our own purpose, and our own purpose adds more meaning to our lives. It means our brief moment in the sun matters because that's the only moment we have.
Scientism is actually very spiritual in nature. Its satanic goals has to be something that was capable of destroying trust in the Bible's account of the creation of all that exists. Such a feat would simultaneously destroy trust in the God of that creation and render his whole eternal plan as set forth in the Bible untrustworthy because its God had been proven false by an allegedly ultra-realistic, wholly secular scientific establishment. And it's interesting because when you do the research, you quickly start to see that humanity's sinful desire to rid themselves of an all-powerful creator had been fed this lie of evolution and the Big Bang narrative from the enemy himself. And that these concepts of vast ages of the earth and the gradual progression of life forms were not first proposed by the likes of Darwin, but they actually go quite far back and are found in the teachings of many mystic traditions such as Kabbalism and Greek and Babylonian mystery schools. Could it be that Satan had been working with key men throughout the ages to bring about a very complex, complete rewrite of the truth of God's creation? Could it be that evolution was only the end result of a much bigger deception going on? We start off with Pythagoras. And again, the Pythagorean theorem is very, very important because it basically started off a lot of the scientific thought right down through Copernicus and Darwin, and many of them got their thoughts through Pythagoras.
Our alphabet, the buildings that surround us, even the music we hear, owes a debt to this brilliant philosopher. In his pursuit of wisdom, Pythagoras traveled broadly, searching for lost occult knowledge. He found it in the mystery schools scattered throughout many different cultures. Pythagoras synthesized the elements of these teachings into a new discipline, philosophy. Its foundation, numbers.
They believed that number was like God, and to connect with this was to be talking to God. And so from that arises a whole lot of symbolism that later becomes numerology, Kabbalah, things like that.
So the long and the short of it is that the Pythagorean mysticism, fetching disguised as something scientific, reduced practically everything to mathematical numbers. Little, however, do people in general even remotely suspect that there is any subjectivity, much less occult spiritism, occult in either mathematics or science. The general belief is that both math and science are strictly objective enterprises and strictly secular tools in the hand of a rather elite band of ultra-realistic laborers for mankind. The theoretical science establishment has cultivated the image that it is uniquely removed and aloof from any contamination by philosophies and religions. The establishment's mantra is that mathematics and science represents a dedicated search for truth.
There are a lot of people out there who question the moon landing. I personally don't believe we went to the moon. And so you have to ask the question, these men of science figured all this stuff out as we've been taught. And they saw that this heliocentric model, this infinitely expanding universe, is the world. They speculated on this, and then we just happened to go up into space in the 50s and 60s, allegedly, and prove that everything they thought is true. I mean, that's when you really think about it, step back and think about that. I mean, what are the chances that these men, back with no computers, no electronics, all theories, just writing equations, theoretical physicists of the time really is what they were. They came up with all of this stuff, and then we went, when we developed the technology to go up into space, allegedly, found out that everything they thought is true. I mean, we really need to question that.
Get into the Apollo missions in the 60s. They supposedly went 240,000 miles away to the moon. And yet since then, 2016, 2017, the furthest that man has been in space is 400 miles.
We know that they're lying to us about the millions of years. We know they're lying to us about evolution. We know they're lying to us about the Big Bang. All this stuff. If they're lying to us about all that, then what else? What else are they lying to us about?
On numerous occasions, NASA admits that we can't go beyond low Earth orbit, which is between 99 miles and 1,200 miles away. The interesting thing is that the moon is said to be 238,000 miles away, which is a difference of 236,800 miles.
Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
We're told that the sun is 93 million miles away from the Earth. We're also told that the sun and the moon appear to be the same size in the sky. The explanation is that the diameter of the sun is almost 400 times the size of the diameter of the moon. The distance of the moon to the sun is 400 times greater. Therefore, this is coincidence.
We are told that the Earth spins at 1,040 miles per hour, while the Earth travels around the sun at 66,000 miles per hour. Meanwhile, the whole solar system is going inside the Milky Way galaxy at a speed of 490,000 miles per hour. And finally, the entire Milky Way galaxy is darting through infinite space at over 1 million miles per hour. Most people believe this, and yet every experiment ever conducted to prove even the simple spin of the Earth has failed.
Science is supposed to be point A, B, C, and D. You come up with a hypothesis. You then come up with a way to test that hypothesis, and hopefully it's a repeatable method that you can get the same results. And you can then verify if your hypothesis is true or false. And science has actually done this with several different things. Airy's failure, Sagnac, Michelson-Morley, Michelson-Gale experiments, many different things, and even today, gyroscopes. They all show through the scientific method that the Earth does not move. It absolutely does not move. It is ether, what they call the ether, and the stars, everything around us, which is moving around us. We are stationary. Everything we see in the sky revolves around the Earth.
In 1887, Albert Michelson and Edward Morley conducted what's known as the Michelson-Morley experiment. This experiment was attempting to prove the speculated motion of the Earth around the Sun, and when it failed, Albert Einstein was forced to form the theory of relativity to overcome this problem. In fact, anytime mainstream science is faced with undesirable results, they create a workaround, which isn't real science at all.
Challenging outer space and the cosmos, we have all these pictures of this stuff that people will believe are real, and so it's too big of a conspiracy, a lot of people think. But in my opinion, I think we've just underestimated the power of Satan, and we're warned about this, the deceiver and deception, and I think it's something we really need to step back and say, hey, I think how powerful is this deceiver? Is it possible that the deception could be this big?
I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, Just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Well, I don't suppose we can wait for some alien race to come down and threaten us, but I think that between us we can bring about that realization.
Create the heavens and the earth.
Why do you use the word who? You see, you immediately beg the question by using the word who.
Well, then how did it get created?
Well, by a very slow process.
Well, how did it start?
Nobody knows how it started. We know the kind of event that it must have been. We know the sort of event that must have happened for the origin of life.
What was that?
It was the origin of the first self-replicating molecule.
Right, and how did that happen?
I told you we don't know.
So you have no idea how it started?
No, nor has anybody.
Nor has anyone else. What do you think is the possibility that intelligent design might turn out to be the answer to some issues in genetics or in evolution?
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
Wait a second. Richard Dawkins thought intelligent design might be a legitimate pursuit?
And that designer could well be a higher intelligence from elsewhere in the universe. Well, but that higher intelligence would itself have had to have come about by some explicable or ultimately explicable process. It couldn't have just jumped into existence spontaneously. That's the point.
So Professor Dawkins was not against intelligent design, just certain types of designers, such as God.
This is Aaron Russo, a filmmaker and former politician. To his left is Nicholas Rockefeller of the infamous Rockefeller banking and business dynasty. After maintaining a close friendship with Nicholas Rockefeller, Aaron eventually ended the relationship, appalled by what he had learned about the Rockefellers and their ambitions.
I got a call one day from an attorney woman I knew, and she said, "Would you like to meet one of the Rockefellers?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And we became friends, and he began to divulge a lot of things to me. So he said to me one night, he said that there's going to be an event there, and out of that event, you're going to see we're going to go into Afghanistan, so we can run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We're going to go into Iraq to take the oil and establish a base in the Middle East, and we're going to go into Venezuela and try and get rid of Chavez. And the first two they've accomplished. Chavez they didn't accomplish. And he said you're going to see guys going into caves looking for people that they're never going to find. You know, he was laughing about the fact that you have this war on terror. There's no real enemy. He's talking about how by having this war on terror, you can never win it because it's an eternal war. And so you can always keep taking people's liberties away. And I said, how are you going to convince people that this war is real? He said, but the media can convince everybody it's real. I mean, you know, it's just that you keep talking about things. You keep saying it over and over and over again, and eventually people believe it. You know, you created the Federal Reserve in 1913 through lies. You create 9/11, which is another lie. Through 9/11, then you're fighting a war on terror, and now all of a sudden you go into Iraq, which was another lie, and now they're going to do Iran. You know, and it's all one thing leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. Now, I would say that, what are you doing this for? What's the point of this thing? You have all the money in the world you ever want. You have all the power. I said, you know, you're hurting people. It's not a good thing. And he would say, what do you care about the people for? Take care of yourself and you take care of your family. And then I said to him, what are the ultimate goals here? He said, the ultimate goal is to get everybody in this world chipped with the RFID chip and have all money be on those chips and everything on those chips. And if anybody wants to protest what we do or violate what we want, we just turn off their chip.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly, answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever.